Hello, my name is Susan, and welcome to the first episode of Nebula Knits. What I'm hoping is going to become a podcast where I talk about my knitting projects and plans. It's something I've been meaning to do for a really long time, but I think I just kept getting in my own way about it. I'm kind of wanting to make sure that I have my best camera charged up and fully ready to go, and that I had this amazing backdrop to the space, and I had loads of really cool finished objects to show for the very first one. But I think with it being the end of the year and having quite a few plans for the new year in terms of my knitting, that this is actually a better place to start than with this kind of non existent perfect starting point for a podcast. Before I get into the projects I want to talk about, my plans for 2024, I thought it might be good to introduce myself and where I'm at with my knitting journey a little bit. So I have been knitting since 2021. I was a pandemic knitter, but before that, I was crocheting since 2017. The reason I ended up almost entirely changing over to knitting was because I always wanted to make garments, and I loved color work, and I love the kind of fabrics that you could get from knitting, and I tried to emulate that with crochet for a really long time, and it got to a point where I just kind of had to admit I just needed to learn how to knit. It did take me quite a while to retrain my brain and my hands into what I needed to do for knitting, but since then I've pretty much been knitting constantly since 2021. I still feel like a really new knitter compared to a lot of other ones that I know, but it's something that I'm still, every time I try a project, I'm trying something new and trying to push myself a little bit more. Part of having been knitting and crocheting for oh gosh, nearly 7 years now, I do have a fairly sizable stash. So for 2024, for various reasons, some of them to do with personal circumstances outside of my general knitting habits, but also just because of the amount of yarn that is in my house currently, I really want to spend 2024 not buying any new yarn, not bringing any more into the house. I do spin as well. I've been spinning for a few months. I'm kind of allowing myself to spin new yarn, and once I've used up all of the fibre that is in the house, I can buy small amounts of fibre to also add to it, because I'd still like to keep that hobby going, even if I'm not actively buying yarn. I don't want to stop spinning just for the sake of keeping stash where it is, but I want to be more mindful and more intentional with the way that I'm bringing fibre into the house. I want to make sure that I'm not buying any yarn. I want to use things from stash. I want to get through projects that I've planned for multiple years at this point, or just frog projects that have not been working out, because I don't need a room full of yarn. I don't need to keep purchasing yarn. It's, as much as I really enjoy supporting small businesses and independent makers and dyers, there is no need for one person to have what I have already is two 40-litre plastic tubs full of yarn ready to be used. That already feels excessive to me. That's not necessarily a comment on anyone else's yarn consumption. If you have way more yarn than that and you love it and you're super comfortable with it, that is amazing. I live in a very, very small Victorian terrace. I do not have space for any more. It's also getting to a point where going through the numbers and like how many garments I make a year, this will take me several years to just knit up all the garment plans that I have in stash. There is no point in making that longer. I don't want to get to a point where I've spent a load of money on materials for a project that by the time I actually get around to making it is no longer my taste, and I need to find a new thing to use that for, or maybe I don't like the colours and I have to destash it. So I just want to get more of a handle on my stash and to actually get to all of the projects that I'm at the moment really, really excited about making. This is also in conjunction with generally what I'm hoping is going to be a low buy year for me in 2024. Again, I've had some personal circumstances change recently, which means that saving is much more of a priority. So things like reading and sewing, which I'd say are probably my two other, the most time consuming hobbies that I have. I have fabric, I have scraps, I have notions enough to make so many more garments, more than I've made this year, just because I've been doing that for so long that even though I don't buy fabric that frequently, it does just build up over time. And the same with reading. I have so many books. I used to read a lot more than I did before I found knitting, because now I have something else to idly do with my hands other than pick up a book. So I would love to get back on top of my to be read pile as well this year. So, generally speaking, going into 2024, for me, it is going to be a year of using what I already have and making the most of places where I've already invested my money and my resources to try and get back on top of that and to really re examine my habits with buying and making. Um, so, yes, that is my current plan for 2024. With that, it's probably a really good time to show my first project that I have, which I designed as a stash busting project for some small balls of hand spun, for some odds and ends, and also for some things in stash that I just didn't actually have a plan for. I bought it without a plan, which is not something I tend to do now, but it's something that I definitely did in the early days when I was just getting into the world of like indie dyeing. So if I can get it on camera without pulling everything out of the project bag, it's very difficult to get all on screen at once. But this is my heavily modified Drop Dead Freddy sweater. So this is a pattern by Cat Weaver. I've knit it twice before, once as a test knit, which I made for my wife, and once for myself. Usually it is a strand of fingering weight held with mohair, or 2 strands of mohair. For this, I have this at a DK weight, at a smaller gauge than is recommended in the pattern. My gauge is much, much tighter than Cat's usually anyway, so I've knit with the recommended needles and it's come out, I think, 2 or 3 stitches per inch smaller. So as you can see, I have striped on every single row. So this is made up of 10 balls of leftovers, scraps, handspun, like I was saying. I think I would love to go into more detail about where each of these came from, probably when this is a finished object, rather than just now, because it's quite a lot to get through. But I tried to pick out a lot of tonals that also didn't blend together too much. I think I have more of these kind of deep pinks and purples, but when I put them all together, they just kind of looked flat, or like they were trying to go together but didn't quite work. Whereas this, I think that the striping reminds me a little bit of like Noro yarn or other kind of color changing yarn. So I really like how these all work together with slightly different shades and tones of the pinks and purples. So for modifications, I used the pattern numbers for casting on. I think when I originally knit this, I knit it in the size, I think it was the 5th size. And for this one, I cast on for the 7th size just to get me that extra width that I needed, because my gauge was smaller. I also use that for the neck shaping. As you can see, I have finished the body. So coming down all the way to the bottom, instead of doing I-cord bind off, I've done 10 rows of ribbing at the bottom. I've cropped it. I haven't done the split sides. I haven't done the drop stitches. So pretty much was just the cast on numbers. And then when I picked up for the sleeve, which is what I've just started here, I also used the numbers from pattern to do that. So I'll be knitting it to roughly the same length as my other one that I made for myself, and then finish with 10 rows of ribbing. And then I'm also hoping to do 10 rows around the neckline as well to give it more of the classic shape. I wanted to do something that was almost like brain off knitting for over Christmas, but that still kept my interest. And I think having this kind of 10-row stripe repeat has really helped me be motivated, because even if I don't necessarily want to blast through like a huge chunk of body, I know that I can do one repeat, which for me is on the gauge is like 2 inches. So it's still getting a sizable portion of the body finished. It is going to block out quite considerably. I did do a small swatch and it does kind of open and stretch. So at the moment it is maybe a little bit thinner than I want it to be on the final garment. I want it to be quite oversized and cropped so I can wear it kind of with high-waisted jeans or over a skirt or a dress. But yes, at the moment it has been very, very fun. I'm very excited to have this as a wearable piece, and I'm really, really happy with how all the colours and the fibres have blended together. So next up, I do just need to move this giant bag. The one problem with knitting something that is made up of 10 different balls of wool is that it is a nightmare to transport everywhere. It's basically just been taking over my entire sofa. So this thing is just full of random odds and ends, and there's strings coming out everywhere. So yeah, I'm really enjoying the project. It is not very practical and did not come with me when I was traveling around over Christmas. So the next thing, I think the color was kind of inspired. I was really enjoying the pinks and the purples and that kind of like the moody pink of that project of the Drop Dead Freddy, that I decided to stick with pink but went a completely different direction for a pair of socks. So this is most of a Twister Lolly sock. The Twister Lolly sock pattern is by the Crimson Stitchery by Anushka, who was one of my main motivations for actually getting into knitting and feeling really confident that I would be able to get into knitting from crochet. I absolutely love her. I know she's taking a break from videos at the moment, but she's got an amazing backlog of videos and does wonderful projects. But if I put my hand in, maybe I'll show it a little bit better. So this sock is like a little 4-hole lace repeat. It's really fun, really easy to memorize. It's also going to have a ribbed toe, which I think will look great. These are definitely a summer sock pattern, and I think with this kind of bonkers neon pink is very much a summer color as well. But I was just really fancying a sock that wasn't vanilla or ribbed, but would be kind of easy to memorize for large chunks of it. So this has been my kind of traveling around at Christmas knitting, because once I did the first few repeats of the lace work, it's super easy to memorize. Also, the benefit for me, I have very, very small feet. So this is almost a full sock for me, the UK size 4. So I'm hoping I'll be able to get these done pretty speedily. And I think these will be great fun with trainers once the weather is a bit less miserable and cold, and I can wear something that doesn't have to cover my ankles the entire time. The yarn itself is from, the name has just completely dropped out of my head. I will put it on screen somewhere. It is from a yarn shop in the Corn Exchange in Leeds. It's a very, very sweet little yarn shop. They have loads of colour variety, and they also have their own hand dyed, and that is what this is. I just can't remember the colour, which is terrible as well, so I'll need to put that somewhere. But again, you can kind of see it is this really, really neon Barbie pink. And I think with colour generally, I tend to stick with kind of jewel tones, neutrals, moodier colours. But for socks, I feel like it's going to be such a small pop of colour, and you might not see it anyway, that I love a neon sock. I love a crazy sock colour. So I'm very excited to have these done. It is a 75-25 merino nylon blend, so it is lovely and squishy, and I'm hoping will be quite sturdy even with the lace work. So those are the projects that I've been actively working on. There is one that I do really want to knit more on, but I have just not had the brain space for, and it is going to look ridiculous for the point that it's at the moment, which is, this just looks like complete nonsense. If you can maybe just make out the honeycomb cable and then some of my cables there. This is the very, very start of a cream Billie pullover. But obviously, because I've not knit very much, the cables are just rolling over each other. I've done maybe 3 inches of it after I did the short rows. So it's not looking very impressive right now. But at the end of October, our house flooded during storm. Is it Babette? I'm not sure. Babet seems a bit too fancy to describe a storm, but that's how I think I heard one person say it, so we'll call it that. But yes, our house flooded, and it's been extremely stressful. It's the whole house is upside down. Life has been crazy. And this was the first couple of days after that happened. I was so anxious about everything and didn't know what we were going to be doing, how we'd be able to kind of manage without a kitchen, which is the room that flooded. So I immediately put down everything basic that I was working on knitting wise, and I picked up this. It's a pattern that I've had in my library for a while. It's been kind of my one of my like dream projects is to knit like an all over cable, like very, very traditional kind of aran jumper like this. and I desperately wanted something that would completely take up my brain space as a way of kind of coping with it. So the first few days, this is all I could really focus on. I had to do a little bit of frogging. I've done a bit of cabling before, but I've never done a project where I've been mixing my cables. So that's still very new to me. Like I said, I still feel like such a beginner knitter in so many ways, and I think this has been a really good example of that for me. So I did have to frog it a few times, which is why I made so little progress. And then almost immediately, um, things I had to start moving things and getting things organized and getting quotes from people. So my brain was immediately taken up with a lot of other things. This is why this is languished. But I'm hoping once I finish my Drop Dead Freddy, which has been very kind of, I guess, like popcorny. I've been really enjoying knitting on it and getting chunks of that finished. I'll be able to go back to my Billie Pullover and make it look a bit more like a jumper and less like a weird cream slug. The yarn for that, I actually picked up at a charity shop. So I don't have it on the cone just because I'm nearly at the end of a ball that I wound off. But I got a really big cone of kind of cream 5-ply Gansey yarn, which was an absolute steal. I messed up my calculations a little bit because I'm holding it double to make it the right gauge. I think by the time I got to the end of it, I have maybe 3/4 of the yarn that I need to finish this jumper, and that was already kind of accounting for it being a little bit cropped. So I've also got a cone of Woolyknit British wool aran in that same kind of cream ecru colour. When it arrived, it matches exactly. The gauge, I think, is half a stitch different between this, which I feel like by the time I've gotten to that point, I'll be able to either go up a needle size to make up the difference, or I might just see where it's at on the body and experiment and see if that's going to be fine. It might be fine after blocking, but I think that's going to be a bit of an experiment just to do maybe the sleeves or the very bottom of the body. I'm going to try and make sure that it's, if I have to stop partway down the body, that I'll kind of get down the sleeves and try and make it look even when I get to it. It's unfortunate that I didn't have enough of it, but because the first cone was from a charity shop for, I think, £4, and then the wool cone is, it wasn't cheap, but Woolyknit is kind of very affordable brand for the quality of wool that you get on the cone. The whole thing would cost me like less than £25, which for me I feel like is great value for something that's at such like a tight gauge, and has so much wool that goes into it just because of all of those cables just eat it up every opportunity. So that is a longer term project. I'm hoping by the next time I make a video, I'll have made a little bit more progress on that. So those are the 3 knitting projects that I have on the go at the moment. Finally, I wanted to talk a little bit about a small spinning project that I have. I'm just going to quickly wind that back on so it doesn't look like quite a mess. So for Christmas, my wife got me a new drop spindle. So I have been spinning since, I want to say, September. I got very, very addicted to my very cheap drop spindle that I got from Amazon, which I don't normally like using, but it was the only place that I could find one that was kind of cheap enough for me to just see if I would actually use it and actually get into the hobby. It's not very well balanced and it's very, very heavy. So it was good for learning, but wasn't great for actually spinning for long amounts of time. I was then also really lucky to find a spinning wheel, a vintage spinning wheel, I think it's from the 70s or the 80s, on Facebook Marketplace for a very reasonable price. And that kind of eclipsed my drop spindle for a little while because I was getting used to learning how to use that and take care of it and the differences for spinning on a wheel and a spindle. But like I said, for Christmas, my wife got me this drop spindle, which I don't know if it's going to focus very well, which is this really beautiful, I think it's rosewood, and then kind of a darker stained actual spindle there. This has been a revelation. Who knew if you actually buy quality tools, it makes the job so much easier. This has been so lightweight. It spins forever once you set it going. It doesn't hurt my hands in the same way. So I have been taking advantage of that so I can actually sit and spin on the sofa while I've been watching films in these kind of in between daft days between Christmas and New Year's. So on it, that will kind of focus properly at all. Um, this is some undyed Jacob fleece that I got from eBay. I think it was 90 grams of it that arrived when I actually weighed it up. There was someone, I think, doing a bit of a clear out of just random pieces. It was, I think, for a couple of pounds, and I wanted to have a go with Jacob just to see how it felt, and I felt like this is a really good way to go about it. So I've been really enjoying spinning it. I love how the singles are working up. I want to say about 3/4 of the way through of the little bag that they sent me, and I have some other fibre that I got from the Natural Fibre Co, which is the mill that does the milling for blacker yarns. So they occasionally do these bags of carded waste. So it's waste fibre from after the spinning, so it's not necessarily that the staple leg's not quite as long, and there's imperfections and things like that in it. But I managed to get a bag of carded waste for a very reasonable amount. About, I think when I spin it, it will be about a jumper's worth, which is a Jacob mohair and alpaca blend, which I've been doing on my wheel just to make it go a little bit faster because it's a much bigger spinning project. But that is an extremely similar colour to this undyed Jacob. So I'm hoping once this is done and actually turned into some yarn, I'm going to dye this and see how this kind of like dark brownish grey plays with the acid dyes that I have. I have a couple of acid dyes that I've played with once or twice. I'm still, like I said, I've only been spinning since September. I've been had these dyes for, I want to say, a month. um it's still something I'm experimenting with. I'm really not good at dyeing at the moment. But I'm just experimenting. I'm trying to be very easy on myself with dyeing fibre and hand spun because it is really new and I'm finding uses for things. I think a really good example, one of the colours in my Drop Dead Freddy is a some hand spun where I think on my second wash I hadn't fully washed out all the lanolin. So when it came to dyeing, although I'd like soaked it in the mordant and then dyed it according to all the instructions, it just wasn't sticking the way that it should because there was still quite a lot of grease in the fibre. So instead of coming out this like rich, true red, which is what I was trying to dye, it came out like neon orange, reddish pink. It's a very strange colour. It's absolutely not what I was trying for, but it works really well in that project. And I only have 50 grams of it, so it's fine. But yeah, lesson learned for next time. This does not feel anywhere near as greasy, but I will give this a very, very solid wash when I come to kind of fix the twist. And then I will try over dyeing it. And I'm hoping that because of this darker base colour, it's going to give me a lovely kind of moody, rich colour when I actually come to dye it. I know I've got some hand-dyed yarns on like a yak base that starts closer to this colour than a white. And I really, really love how colours look on a yak base. So I'm hoping it'll be similar when I'm over dyeing the Jacob. So I don't have any finished objects because I've tried to kind of draw a line under what I've done like pre-podcast and I'll be in post-podcast projects because I didn't really know where to put the cutoff for what I wanted to show or what I wanted to talk about. And I was worried that like, oh, my finished objects mostly have been like very small or practical items recently, either for gift knitting or just because that was all my brain could manage. And I was getting kind of, again, in my own head about like, oh, these aren't very exciting projects and I want to see them. So I'm just drawn a line. I'm hoping that at least one of these will be completely finished the next time I speak. I do have plans for more things to cast on for some smaller projects, so I might also have some small FOs. But I have a habit of trying to rush through projects and rush through my knitting because one, I'm excited about the project, but also because I want the finished item. I knit things that I want to own. And again, just with I'm slowing down because I'm not bringing more projects in and I'm not making more plans, and also just because I want to be more mindful of what I'm making and the way that I'm making. I'm going to try and slow myself down. I would obviously love to have like the socks and the jumper and this spinning project completely finished the next time that I do one of these, but um, I have other things going on. I have a full-time job, so I'm trying to go a bit easy on myself and not put pressure on me to do that. Um, so yeah, fairly short one, but it will be lovely if you want to come back and see how these projects progress, and also to see how I manage on my yarn ban and working through kind of past plans and projects. But I would love to know what you are casting on for the new year, if anything, and if you have any knitting goals or plans, or anything like that. Oh, that's something I should have done at the beginning, actually. I am wearing a hand knit, so I can talk about that very, very briefly. This is the Cherry by Midori Hirose, which is a really lovely pattern that I really want to knit another one of, not in kind of a woolly wool, in like a mohair and a fluff. I think would be really fun. This is just in, I think it's Drops Flora or Drops Nord, whichever the 100% wool one is, in charcoal, and they're kind of olivey green colour because I had a little scrap ready to go. But I think that is everything, and I will remember to talk about what I'm wearing up top next time. You can tell I'm very new to this. But if you made it to the end, thank you so much for watching. I'm really excited to start documenting my knitting this way, and I hope to see you again soon.